Have you ever noticed that in literature, women who break the rules almost never get a happy ending? One loses her sanity, another sacrifices love for security, another dreams of escaping but never manages to leave. Different stories, different countries, different authors, yet they all ask the same question. What happens when a woman doesn't fit society's expectation? Hi everyone and welcome back to the podcast. In today's episode, I'll be comparing A Streetcar Named Desire, The Great Gatsby, and Dubliners to explore how these works portray women who challenge or simply fail to fit the roles society expects them to play. Although these works were written in different contexts, they reveal striking similarities in the way women are judged, controlled, and punished. But before looking at these women individually, we need to understand the roles they live in. It's a must to consider the different historical contexts in which these stories were written and set. Dubliners reflects the social values of early 20th century Ireland, where the Catholic Church had a strong influence on everyday life and ideas about morality, sexuality, and marriage. The Great Gatsby takes place during the Roaring Twenties, a period of social change and greater freedom for women, but where marriage, wealth, and social status still strongly influenced their lives. Finally, A Streetcar Named Desire reflects post-Second World War America when traditional gender roles became stronger again, and women were often expected to focus on marriage, family, and domestic life. So, different decades, different societies, different rules. But here's the interesting part. The rules change, but the pressure doesn't really disappear. Let's begin with Blanche DuBois, one of the most complex female characters in modern literature. At first, Blanche appears elegant, educated, and sophisticated. However, as the play progresses, we discover that behind this carefully constructed image lies a woman deeply affected by trauma. After losing her young husband, she desperately searches for affection and validation through different relationships. Instead of receiving sympathy, Blanche is judged for her sexuality. Her past becomes more important than her suffering. Stanley, her brother-in-law, investigates her life, spreads rumors about her, and destroys her reputation. In his eyes, and in the eyes of those around him, Blanche is no longer a victim but a woman who deserves no respect. The most shocking movement of the play comes when Stanley rapes Blanche. Even after this horrific event, nobody believes her. Rather than protecting her, her own family decides to send her to a psychiatric institution while Stanley continues living his life as if nothing happened. This raises an important question. Is Blanche truly punished because she lies, or because she refuses to behave like the perfect woman society expects? Now let's move to Daisy Buchanan in The Great Gatsby. Daisy is often described as selfish, superficial, and materialistic. But is that really fair? Before Gatsby became wealthy, Daisy genuinely loved him. However, when he left for war, she chose to marry Tom Buchanan, a man who could offer financial security, social status, and stability. Years later, Gatsby returns, convinced that he can recreate the past. He spends years building his fortune for one purpose, winning Daisy back. One of the novel's most memorable scenes happens when Daisy begins crying after seeing Gatsby's collection of expensive shirts. At first, it seems like a ridiculous reaction, like, seriously, are you crying over shirts? But perhaps she isn't crying because of the shirts themselves. Perhaps she's mourning the life she never had. Later, Daisy accidentally kills Muriel with Gatsby's car. Gatsby immediately takes the blame to protect her, yet Daisy never admits the truth. Instead, she lives with Tom, abandoning Gatsby completely. Many readers see Daisy as the villain. However, her decisions can also be understood as a result of living in a society where wealth and marriage determine a woman's future. Her choices are not simply about love, they are also about security and social position. Choosing Tom may not have been choosing love, it may have been choosing survival. These differences between periods are important because patriarchy does not always take the same form. In Daisy's world, during the Roaring Twenties, women could appear more independent, but their freedom was still limited by their economic and social position. In Blanche's world, after the Second World War, traditional ideas about femininity and female sexuality became particularly restrictive. In both cases, however, women are expected to behave according to the rules created by society. and those who fail to do so face serious consequences. So, even though Daisy and Blanche live in different periods, they face a similar problem. Society gives them rules, but very few good options, and when they choose the wrong option, they pay the price. Finally, let's look at the women in Dubliners. Unlike Blanche or Daisy, their stories are much quieter, but they are equally heartbreaking. Honestly, sometimes the quiet stories are the ones that hurt the most. Take Evelyn, for example. She dreams of escaping her abusive home with Frank and starting a new life abroad. Everything is ready. She has the opportunity to live forever. But when the moment finally arrives, she freezes. She cannot move. She watches the ship leave without her. Fear, family responsibility, religion, and social expectations are stronger than her desire for freedom. Sometimes the saddest ending isn't dying, it's never allowing yourself to live. Another important character is Polly from the boarding house. Her future is largely controlled by her mother, who carefully manipulates events until marriage becomes almost unavoidable. Love is secondary. Marriage functions more like a social and economic transaction. Finally, Greta Conroy from The Dead reminds us that women also have emotional lives that men often fail to understand. At the end of the story, she reveals that she once loved a young man named Michael Fury, who died after risking his life to see her one last time. Her husband, Gabriel, suddenly realizes that he will never be the greatest love of his wife's life. It is in a quiet moment, but one that completely transforms our understanding of both characters. So, what can we see when we put all these women together? Although the historical contexts are very different, the experiences of these women show that the forms of patriarchal control can change without disappearing. In Dubliners, religion, morality, and family expectations restrict women's choices. In The Great Gatsby, wealth, marriage, and social status play a major role. In A Streetcar Named Desire, gender roles and ideas about female sexuality become forms of control. The rules are different, but women are still judged according to expectations about how they should behave, love, marry, and live. This suggests that the problem is not simply the period in which these women live, but the patriarchal structures that continue to shape their choices. Although Blanche, Daisy, Evelyn, Polly, and Greta make different choices, they all face the same reality. Blanche expresses her sexuality and is destroyed. Daisy chooses security instead of passion and is remembered as selfish. Evelyn dreams of freedom but remains trapped. Polly has little control over her own future. Greta carries memories that society expects her to leave behind. Each woman is punished differently, but all of them pay a price for living in societies where their choices are limited by gender expectations. And this is what makes these stories so interesting to compare. The problem is not simply that these women make bad decisions. The problem is that we have to ask how many truly free choices they actually had. So perhaps the real question isn't whether these women make the right decisions. Perhaps the real question is whether they were ever allowed to make truly free choices in the first place. Because sometimes having a choice doesn't necessarily mean having freedom. Even though these works were written in different historical periods, many of their themes remain surprisingly relevant. Women are still judged differently for their sexuality, still expected to balance independence with social expectations, and still face criticism no matter which path they choose. You choose your career, you're selfish. Choose your family, you're giving up your dreams. Choose your love, you're naive. Choose yourself, well, suddenly you're too much. That's what makes these stories timeless. They aren't simply about individual women, they're about the invisible rules that shape their lives and about what happens when they dare to break them. Now, I will ask you the final question of the episode. If you had been in Blanche's, Daisy's, Evelyn's, Polly's, or Greta's situation, would you have made the same choices? Or perhaps more importantly, would you have had any better choices to make? Thank you so much for listening. I hope this episode has encouraged you to look beyond these characters' decisions and instead question the societies that shape them. And remember, sometimes the real villain isn't the woman who breaks the rules, it's the rules themselves. I look forward to your comments. See you in the next episode.